Oh, it's not enough to do nothing. It's time for us to do something.
Good evening and welcome to Pellowe Talk. I'm Dave Pellowe, and tonight we're going to talk about Cardinal George Pell. He is slated to be the headline speaker at this year's Church and State Summit, and already that's causing some waves, some shock, some concern, some praise, some congratulations. So we're going to talk about, is it right to invite him or should we deplatform him because the leftist media have falsely accused him of a crime which the full bench of Australia's High Court 7-0 declared he was innocent of and should never have been found guilty on the ridiculously weak charges and case brought against him. So should we be entertaining him or should we be deplatforming him? Plus, leftist elitist media continue to preach their moral superiority, telling Aboriginal elders in the remote regional town of Burke that they don't know what they're talking about. They have no idea, and they have no right to say there's no problem with Australia Day. We'll also have a look at Vice President Kamala Harris and her incitement to insurrection of violent offenders and rioters who have been charged and found guilty multiple times. And she's encouraging and excited about the project to pay for their bail and put them back out on the streets so they can continue to do that. First, let's have a look at Andrew Bolt summarising his opinion of the High Court decision and the case against Cardinal George Pell, because he does it so very well.
Cardinal George Pell is innocent. That's what the High Court effectively said today. Unanimous, 7 judges to 0. He is innocent. Now, those High Court judges spoke with one voice. Pell should never have been convicted of the rape of 2 boys in his cathedral. And they freed him at last from jail after 405 days of imprisonment, most of it in solitary, for a crime that I will show you again he could not possibly have committed. So shame on all those people who persecuted Pell in one of this nation's greatest miscarriages of justice. Now, don't tell me to have faith in our justice system now that justice has been done at last, for which I do thank the High Court. Yes, Pell is indeed now free, but this witch hunt has ruined his reputation, destroyed his brilliant career. He was the world's 3rd most senior Catholic, and it's robbed him of so many days of his freedom. So shame on the state institutions which try to destroy him, to destroy a man who was loathed by the left as a conservative and chosen by the mob to be the scapegoat for his church. Shame on Victoria Police, which trawled for complaints against Pell and beyond this particular matter, even issuing public appeals for victims to come forward in a process that we know from other such miscarriages of justice is likely to include false memories, false claims and hopes for compensation. Shame also on the ABC, our national broadcaster, for hysterically promoting damaging claims against Pell that all turned out to be too absurd to lead to charges, or too flimsy to go to trial, or now too weak to survive an appeal. Shame on Melbourne University Press for publishing a bestseller on Pell by ABC journalist Louise Milligan, which wildly accused Pell of many horrible crimes against children, not one of which has stood up to legal scrutiny. But it all fed the Get Pell hysteria during his trial. Shame also on the Victorian Court of Appeal, which in a 2-1 decision last year rejected Pell's initial appeal. That bizarre decision earned the 2 Victorian judges who turned Pell down, earned them a stinging criticism today from the High Court. The High Court accused those judges, including Chief Justice Anne Ferguson, of failing to engage properly with matters in Pell's defence, of having failed to engage with the question of whether there remained a reasonable possibility that the offending of which Pell had been accused had not actually taken place. And shame on the vile mob which still treats Pell as a pedophile. People who refuse to look at the facts. I'll name names later.
You know, that's actually a very, very relevant point. It's these people who still insist he's a pedophile, that still insist he's guilty, despite all of the improbable evidence being extremely scant. The testimony, the single testimony that wasn't recanted, that single testimony being completely implausible, physically impossible. I don't know if we'll go through this whole video tonight. It's 9 minutes. Feel free to look it up. I can put it in the comments for you. But you know, Andrew Bolt does a wonderful job of going through the evidence and examining what the High Court criticised about the case all along. I mean, the sheer injustice of the Victoria Police spruiking for complaints against a citizen of whom there were no previous complaints until he started spruiking, until they started. It beggars belief that the police can be so involved and proactive in this campaign to get Pell. And we know firsthand, viewers of this show will know firsthand that the political ranks of Victoria Police are not above politicising their decisions and their actions to please their political masters. And Neil Mitchell got very upset when I suggested that was possible, but it's manifestly obvious that their use of regulations and powers of discretion is badly done at best and politically motivated at worst. It's quite incompetent and authoritarian in its extreme, and it's selectively prosecuting of conservatives and those right of centre. For example, people protesting the Andrews government instead of those protesting systemic racism and black deaths in custody. I mean, those people are allowed to do whatever they want. The selective prosecution is there for anybody to see, and it does seem credible to suggest that it's politically motivated. But for people to continue to go and call George Pell anything less than a fine Christian man, I think, is to let the media educate you instead of the facts, instead of the evidence. Accusations are not evidence. Accusations do not amount to guilt. Now, the important question is, should fellow Christians, should fellow conservatives, even if you're not religious, should people right of centre continue to shun Pell as if he was still in jail serving that unjustly served 14 months when it was most likely that an innocent man had been convicted? Well, I say no. And so I've invited Cardinal George Pell, and I'm delighted that he's accepted my invitation to be the keynote speaker at the Church and State Summit at the end of this month, February. Now, I've had sponsors who were very keen and past supporters of the Church and State Summit pull out because they can't afford the backlash. And I get it. I understand that they're in a difficult position. I understand that this is not an easy decision. And so there's no harsh feelings. There's disappointment. But still, I understand that it needs to be done by some of these to just not be associated because of the Get Pell hysteria, because of the disinformation and misinformation around his case. We can go into it more, but I'd actually just rather let Andrew Bolt do it because he does it so brilliantly and scriptedly, and I may just waffle a bit. But suffice it to say, there were only two accusers, one of whom recanted and said it never happened before he died of a drug overdose. He told this to his mother, somebody who should be inclined, one would think, to protect him and make sure that the truth was told, and not to certainly have any vested interest in seeing George Pell get off scot-free if indeed he was guilty and her son didn't recant. So there's every reason to believe that he did. However, he certainly never was able to bring that evidence to trial, was never able to be cross-examined, and was never able to have his allegations scrutinised under the standards of legal evidence that are required. Now, a court has a very different standard to the media. For those of you who are old enough to remember a certain person by the name of Lindy Chamberlain, the media again in Australia decided that she had murdered her baby, despite the fact that the court case had not been held and that the evidence had not been assessed, and despite huge problems with the evidence and the court case brought against her by the Director of Public Prosecutions, she was found guilty, and later the evidence and courts exonerated her and said she was innocent of all charges, just as with George Pell. Can you trust the media to determine guilt from innocence? No, you can't, because they are not motivated by justice. They are motivated by ad sales. They are corporate advertising salesmen, not journalists. They are the lying harlot media who will sell their standards to the highest bidder. They are cheap and easy, and the majority of them are this way. There's clearly people like Andrew Bolt who will do the legwork, do the investigative research, and actually come up with objective, credible opinions and results. So for me, for one, I'm not going to deplatform George Pell, no matter how much it costs me in sponsorship, no matter how much it costs me in ticket sales, and no matter who disapproves of the decision that I'm going to do. There's only one person's approval that I seek, and I play and perform for an audience of one, and that is Jesus Christ. The media can, well, take a long walk off a short pier would be the politest way to say it. I have zero regard for what the enemies of the truth, the enemies of the gospel have to say about George Pell or me. I really, really don't care. It was highly prophesied by Jesus himself that his followers would have all kinds of false accusations made against them because they hated him first. And so for the moralizing media to stand in condemnation of somebody like George Pell, to me, means diddly squat. Absolute zero. For those people who are easily triggered by the okay gesture, that was actually meant to be minuscule. So take that as you want. I really don't care what you think because you're going to lie anyway. So let's have a look at some comments from people. Okay, YouTube official says the cancer of corruption in the Victorian Police, Victorian Judiciary and the Australian Broadcasting Corporation is extremely disturbing indeed. Somebody says there's no good guys in this equation. Elizabeth says hi. And the YouTube official says, I know Pell's instinct is to turn the other cheek, but these organisations need to be held to account or the persecution will intensify. Well, that's a given. And the way you can hold these organisations to account is to bring your attention span to the new media, such as The Good Source, such as my show Pellowe Talk, which is disrupting the new media. Don't get your news from them. Get your news from us. Get your opinions and your insights from us. And certainly bring your free market dollars to support independent exercises in objective honesty. And I will tell you exactly what my biases and prejudices are, so you can filter for yourself. Glenn Llewellyn says hi, and Brett Crooks says hi. In the field of lawfare, can a case be made that the state funded both the complainant and the defendant to lessen the process being punishment? The process is the punishment. You would have to take away free market options to be able to make the government pay for everything. The government would have to regulate the price. That means you couldn't get a high-priced barrister, which means you couldn't get the best barrister or lawyer that money could buy. You could only get the one that the government allocated to you, because obviously those people have a right to ask for more if their abilities are more valued. And so there would be a different kind of injustice made by that. It is a complex situation, but it's kind of like telling an athlete they can't perform, even though they're elite in their field and have done more hard work than somebody else and have more talent than somebody else, that they shouldn't be paid more than someone else. because it would be unfair for the government to pay one barrister $1,000 an hour and another barrister $200 an hour. They would have to be level, being the one employer. So no, I don't think, Brett, that the state could fund both sides of the legal case. We've got some anti-Catholic comments. That's probably not super helpful or civil. Let's keep it civil. Let's keep it sincere. Make intelligent arguments, or you're really just sinking to the leftist media's level. Based Taz says he's not religious, but fighting shoulder to shoulder with any true Christian in this battle of good versus evil. Well, the definition of a true Christian is very interesting, and I guess it's going to be somebody who believes God, repeats what Jesus said, and that would include the definition of marriage, which Jesus was very, very clear about. If you don't agree with the definition of marriage, you're not an imitator of Christ, which is what Christian means. And we all fall short, but to deliberately choose to deny Christ's word wouldn't make you a true Christian. But based Taz, thanks for your camaraderie. That's exactly right. Look, I don't make any bones about the fact that I'm a Christian, but I don't expect people to, agree with me simply because I claim I'm a Christian, or because God said it. I actually expect to have to prove my opinions with facts, evidence, data, logic. So I appreciate that things in the Bible do make sense, and I can prove them. And so you don't have to believe in the Bible to believe in the things in the Bible. If you get what I mean. Advancing Australia says, sadly, George Pell bears the odium of the manifestly inadequate Melbourne response to historic child sex abuse within the church. Well, that's a totally different discussion. Andrew Bolt did say he was being made a scapegoat for his church. And that's pretty much the fact. He was hated for other accusations, and the actual charges against him held no water whatsoever. And Amy says she loves the truth. Keep the comments coming in, guys. Share this on your social media and help other people to join in. One of the things I always forget to do is little promos here and there. So I would love you to become a partner of this show. There's no charge. If you can't afford to, please don't. If you don't like it, please don't. If you find no value in this whatsoever and you're just passing through, please don't. But if you would like to see more of The Good Source, more of this show, Pellowe Talk, The Good Source is a website that's dedicated to free press, independent journalism, ideas, especially right of Stalin. Then I would love you to help us keep up and increase the quality and quantity of the production that we're doing of disrupting the lying harlot media. Go to goodsource.news/support. Put your hand in your pocket for $5 or $10 a week or month or more, and just help us actually hold this corrupt media to account by simply firing them, by simply hiring their replacement. That would be fantastic. And you can, of course, go to the website every day for videos and podcasts. We're the first conservative website in Australia with so many contributors making videos and podcasts every day, as well as articles. And we want to not just bring you articles like so many other people, but who are doing fantastic jobs, and I read their stuff all the time and support them. But what's important is that we really disrupt the mainstream media with all of their video content and podcasts as well. So grab a hold of that. Just go to goodsource.news. Right. Let's move on. Let's have a little bit more listen to Andrew Bolt and see exactly what he's saying next.
But for now, there is one man I must single out. Dan Andrews, Premier of Victoria, the state whose judges and police and media did so much to jail an innocent man. Andrews today tweeted, "I make no comment about today's High Court decision, but I have a message for every single victim and survivor of child sex abuse. I see you, I hear you, I believe you." Now, the problem with tweets like that in response to a case like this is that they can so easily be misunderstood, and I'm speaking generously. They can encourage the kind of people who were involved in this witch hunt. I'm talking about people who don't just believe real victims, as we all should, but who also insist on believing people who claim to be victims, even when there is overwhelming evidence against them.
Right.
That is exactly the attitude that caused this witch hunt, this vilification, condemnation, and jailing of an innocent man.
You know, this is exactly right. Bolts onto a very important point right here. And it's the whole spirit behind #MeToo, where, you know, believe all women, as if there's not abundant evidence that people of both genders are capable of lying and making false accusations. And so, no, we don't believe everybody simply because they make an accusation. Of course, we shouldn't rush to presume they're lying, but we also shouldn't rush to presume that their, defendant, the person who they're accusing, their target of their accusation, is guilty. This is what the justice system is set up for. Well, this is what the legal system is set up for. Sometimes it falls a long way short of justice. In the case of Lindy Chamberlain, in the case of George Pell, they suffered extreme punishment, extreme personal cost, before the legal system finally managed to come at a just result. Now, the problem, of course, is this is the same spirit as is exposed in Marxism, this critical theory where people of power are assumed to be guilty and people of any kind of minority or intersectional identity algorithm or arrangement or coordinated of identity minority things like color or gender or sexuality or abilities or different things like that. They must be believed because they are the disempowered. It's this old class warfare trying to set up one group of people against another group of people. It's the politics of division, resentment, hate, and it's ultimately the entire method of Marxist revolution. And it always ends up in injustice, it always ends up in poverty, and it always ends up in oppression, if not the grave, for the people it was presuming to help. That's exactly why you don't just believe everybody who makes an accusation. You have to give them the kind of support as if they were true, but you can't assume they were true all the way to presuming somebody else was guilty. Assume enough of their believe enough. If somebody comes to you and says, I've been abused, I've been assaulted, give them all the counseling and trauma support and financial aid and everything you can. But when it comes to punishing somebody for their accusation, actual justice, the weight of evidence, and centuries of legal tradition, which has refined and improved things to the point where it should become harder and harder and harder to convict innocent people, as the Victorian Court and Supreme Court did. It should be impossible to do that. But that will become even less impossible. It will become more common for false convictions if we simply believe all accusers. That's not an appropriate standard. Let's listen to Bolt a little bit more.
Yes, we must defend victims of child sexual abuse, but we cannot treat every improbable allegation as true and jail innocent people to make ourselves seem more compassionate and more moral. That is not more moral, it is unjust. Now, talking of unjust, do not trust the haters who are now furious, who claim that Pell just got off on a technicality. False. The High Court didn't just say that the case against Pell failed to meet the legal test of beyond reasonable doubt. It went further. It said there was a significant possibility that an innocent person has been convicted. And no wonder. Let me explain why. From the start, the very start, the allegation against Pell was improbable, implausible. He was somehow found guilty of raping 2 teenage choir boys at the same time in an unlocked room in a busy cathedral straight after Mass. Boys that allegedly found in the sacristy which is a change room at the back of his cathedral, stealing altar wine.
Okay, I'm putting that link to the YouTube show in the comments right now, and you can go ahead and watch the rest of that. Compelling viewing. It explains in detail the accusations and the testimony, which is implausible, in which the accuser should not be believed by a reasonable person without a prejudice. What does prejudice mean? It's made up of two words: prejudiciary, before the evidence has been properly weighed and assessed. It's essentially a bias, a bigoted conclusion that is reached prematurely. And that's exactly what's happened. So go and have a look at the rest of that video later on. Thank you very much, Mr. Bolt. Appreciate your coverage of that. Robust and helpful as always. And the next thing we're going to have a look at, if you can watch the rest of that video later on, let's have a look at the news today about this case, which is why I'm bringing it up. Cardinal Pell case. Australian news outlets admit breaching a legal ban. Some of Australia's largest media groups have pleaded guilty to contempt of court over their coverage of Cardinal George Pell's since overturned conviction in a sexual abuse case. Now, let me explain to you why there was a gag order. I believe in freedom of the press. I would hope that the press was not a harloted institution with few exceptions, as it is. I would hope that it's the fourth estate, holding power to account and being the watchman on the wall to guard against abuse of power. But they, in their own power, abused the power that they had by publishing details of Pell's, publishing and leaking details of Pell's case and convictions before the judge said they could. Why was this a problem? Because it was prejudicial, again, tainting the fair trial that was yet to come for other charges that Pell was being brought up on, charges that were dropped later. It was when those charges were dropped because the Director of Public Prosecutions had an inadequate case. It was when those charges were dropped that the judge lifted the gag order and allowed the media to report on what he had been convicted for. Now, remember, before this, an entire trial had to be thrown out because the jury could not reach a verdict. The evidence was inadequate right from the beginning, but they were in such a salivating feeding frenzy to get Pell, to get the Christian, to get the Catholic, one of Australia's, if not Australia's highest ranking Catholic, that they didn't care about justice. They only cared about ad sales. Maybe they actually told themselves they cared about justice, but it was based on their prejudices, based on their anti-Christian bigotry and a false sense of justice. And of course, the reason they didn't like Pell before any allegations were made is because he was conservative. He was a traditional, Bible-believing Catholic who upheld the church's traditional teachings, and he was outspoken doing so. And here's the reality, guys. This is all about the culture war. It's always been about the culture war, and it's only about the culture war, because what the media, the lying harlot media, want to do is take out the most vocal, most outspoken, most faithful Bible-believing Christians and conservatives in the nation, because then they can do whatever they want with their anti-marriage, anti-parenting, anti-baby, anti-life, anti-liberty agenda. They can bring in their identity politics, and they can bring down the Australia that has given us so much freedom, liberty, and prosperity for a century or so. All right, just reading the comments there, nothing to share immediately. Feel free to have a chat amongst yourselves. I won't put everything on the screen. But let's have a little bit look at more of this story. I'll see if I can zoom that in a bit for you all. 12 outlets admitted to breaching a legal order in 2018 that banned the Cardinal from being identified, even though none named him in news coverage. Under the plea agreement, charges against 15 journalists were dropped, and that's a shame. The pleas brought the trial, which began last week, to an abrupt end. The original legal ban, known as a suppression order, had been ordered by a judge in Melbourne to avoid the possibility of prejudicing prejudicial a separate legal case. That case was later aborted by prosecutors. Interesting choice of words. Publishers of newspapers, including the Herald Sun, the Courier Mail, the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, as well as one of the most popular commercial radio networks, Sydney's 2GB, admitted charges on Monday. They include Australia's two biggest media companies, News Corp Australia and Nine Entertainment, among others. Much of the news coverage in December 2018 criticised the secrecy of the case without naming Cardinal Pell specifically. Front-page newspaper headlines included "Nation's biggest story, the story we can't report," and "Secret scandal, it's Australia's biggest story. A high-profile person found guilty of a terrible crime. The world is reading about it, but we can't tell you a word." Victoria's Director of Public Prosecutions argued those headlines were nonetheless prejudicial to other legal proceedings. The High Court of Australia later overturned the guilty verdict against Cardinal Pell, once one of the Pope's most senior advisors. And there we have the good man himself. On Monday, prosecutor Lisa De Ferrari said the plea deal provided acceptance of responsibility in respect of each publication, adding it was in the public interest to withdraw the remaining charges against individual journalists. Additional contempt of court charges against the publications were also withdrawn. So that's no fun at all to be in their shoes. But you know what? How fantastic that there is some justice coming for those cases. I can't wait to see what the punishment is. I hope it's heavy. I hope there is an incentive to not breach those kind of orders ever again. And this is a problem. Self-appointed arbiters of right and wrong, of justice and injustice. The moralising media are a law unto themselves. They claim that they are above Australian law. They would never say so in that many words, but that is in fact the case. They don't believe the government and its law enforcement agencies have any right to investigate a journalist for breaches of necessary national secrecy provisions. And I admit there's a fine balance to be had here, but the mainstream media, the ABC and these mainstream corporations are not interested in a fine line or nuance. It's any kind of criticism or questions, investigation about possible breaches of secrecy, and in this case, suppression orders, are just an abuse of the freedom of press. Well, the press certainly abuse their responsibilities, so they should certainly be held account for those breaches as well in whatever way that they can. Okay, Based Taz says, "My ire is squarely aimed at those who have hijacked the Christian faith and the Catholic Church and many Protestant churches too, not any true loving Christians." Look, we probably agree on that. It's a broad statement and not too specific, so I can broadly agree with it, Based Taz. So, yeah, look, we're not going to get into scrutiny of any denomination. I'm not interested in that at all. What unites us is a necessary resistance against evil. Now, wherever there's any member of a church, my own or any other, who has broken the law and abused a person, they should be held to the full account of the law and be prosecuted with criminal charges as the evidence bears out, according to a justice system. 100%. Nobody is above the law, especially God's law. And governments are meant to be protectors and upholders of those things, and certainly defenders of the innocent. So nobody should be above that kind of inquiry. Where there's a complaint or an accusation, go for it. Let's move on to another topic. I want to have a look now at a tweet from Hugh Remington. We have this tweet here where he condescendingly drips out this tweet yesterday. It takes, it seems like a long time ago. It takes a special genius to argue that the people seeking to change the date of Australia Day, including, from what I can figure out, most Aboriginal Australians, not at all homogenising people there, not at all racist. It takes a special genius to argue that they are the ones who don't care about Aboriginal disadvantage. And then he links to this picture of the Daily Telegraph front page. Exclusive investigation. As city protesters walk the streets to change Australia Day, these kids of the New South Wales bush continue to suffer in silence. Unseen misery is the headline. So let's go and have a look at that story. Seeing Hugh Remington thinks these people have no idea what they're talking about. I'm actually going to jump down to the bit that he's talking about before I read the beginning of the story. Just make that a bit bigger for you. Sissy King, a well-known Aboriginal elder in the town of Burke, northern New South Wales, told the Telegraph that people protesting in Sydney over Australia Day recently were out of touch, such as Hugh Remington, with the troubles faced by the outback mobs. She says, this Indigenous elder, oh, hang on, you can't see what I'm seeing. Let me, there we go. Now we're down there. She says, I don't think the date should be changed because it was a date that was set for all Australians, black, white, brown, yellow, all colours. What a great comment. What a great comment that gives encouragement to conservatives that we're not hated by all Aboriginals. White Australians are not hated. It's only... She says, Sissy King, I'm going to read that again, a well-known Aboriginal elder in the town told the Telegraph that people protesting in Sydney over Australia Day recently were out of touch. Amen. Hallelujah. Out of touch with the troubles faced by outback mobs. She says, I don't think the date should be changed because it was a date that was set for all Australians. Oh, my goodness, she has got it. Black, white, brown, yellow, all colours. There's city people chanting, singing out to that, but at the end of the day, what it's doing is having our own attack one another. We need to stop the division that's always hurt us. Thank you, Sissy. Thank you very much. That's exactly right. My sentiments exactly. This constant divisive politics and protests do nothing to help people with real suffering, real injustice. And what is actually needed is a bit of cultural maturity. It's time to embrace values such as forgiveness and unity, counting us all as one Australia, one nation, regardless of colour, regardless of ethnic background, regardless of whether your ancestors were enslaved by Muslims like mine and dispossessed by the English like mine. That doesn't change who I am, and it doesn't change my experience today. It's part of a rich history that obviously has shades and highlights, but that is the human experience the world over. Every nation and every person probably has stories like that in their legacy, in their history. So this lady is just so mature, and it would be great if more of her people could hear this kind of maturity and actually grow up as a culture, so they stop marching in the streets wanting to change the date of something that celebrates us all, and by doing so will help no one in any real need. Sissy King continues, come and get on the ground in the dirt, talk with us, come out here and have the time with us. People from the city need to get out and see what we don't have that they do have. Come and see what it's like. We can't buy anything after 7 p.m. If I run out of milk, then that's it. I've got no milk tomorrow morning. I would actually really, really love to drive out to Burke. It's about a 10-hour drive if I don't stop. And I would love to go out to Burke, and I've got friends there actually, and would love to take some video, take some microphones and actually interview these people and bring to the Pellowe Talk Show, bring to the Good Source News platform the real experience of what's going on there. And we can take as long as we want. We can do live broadcasts, or we can edit something up and make it a bit more documentary style in 30 to 60 minutes. So, yeah. Now let's have a look at some of the comments. Based Taz says, ask any Indigenous what their primary concerns are. Australia Day won't be one of them. Well, yeah, Hugh Roomington thinks, most of them think different. Current definition of unity and reconciliation: when one group of babies are born, supplied with prepackaged grievances against other babies born into the same culture. Excuse me. Maz Jackson said, all these people in the cities need to go talk to Jacinta Nampijinpa Price. She would totally disagree with the idea that changing a day is going. Well, lots of conservatives do. We had yeah, lots of Indigenous conservatives do. Lots of Indigenous people do. It doesn't. Conservatives shouldn't be a pigeonhole. Look, I'm going to say this forever for the rest of my life. I'm not interested in pigeonholes. I don't want to be right or left. I just want to be correct. I want to have the truth. And if I'm wrong, I want to be corrected. 100% sincere. And so an idea, simply because that's what people in the pigeonhole I'm usually put in should hold to. Not at all. I want to be found to be agreeing with God. That's all I care about. So take me out of any other pigeonhole. I'm just on his side. Based Taz says, to end the division, first we must identify who has divided us. Who is the enemy? It's a bunch of scruffy hippies who subjugated the entire world. Well, that's probably a little bit true and a little bit not taking them seriously. They were academics. They were Marxists. It's the... I can't remember what school it was, the Frankfurt School that escaped Nazi Germany, where they were chasing Marxists and communists in their other brand of socialism, National Socialism. Yeah, they moved to America and took a foothold and a refuge there, and certainly did turn into that scruffy hippie movement. Okay, well, last tonight, I want to have a look at this story on the Daily Wire, another great right of centre, right of Stalin news outlet. Let's see if you can see that. I'll bring that up. Bail fund praised by Kamala Harris has twice freed the same rioter. Now, if Donald Trump, who said, be peaceful, march peacefully, follow the law, obey the law, if he's guilty of inciting riots and insurrection, what do you call this? Bail fund praised by Kamala Harris has twice freed the same rioter. He was just charged again. The bail fund, supported by a dozen members of Joe Biden's presidential campaign and publicly praised by Vice President Kamala Harris, has twice bailed out a violent rioter who has now been charged yet again. What's he been charged with? Mostly peaceful conduct? Thomas Mosley, 29, has been charged with 3 additional offences, according to Alpha News, including 5th-degree drug possession, possession of a dangerous weapon in a courthouse, and 2nd-degree rioting while armed with a dangerous weapon. This is the person that Kamala Harris thinks should be bailed out and put back on the streets as quickly as possible because Democrats are so tough on crime. As the outlet reported, Mosley was previously arrested on property damage and gun possession charges, but was released after the Minnesota Freedom Fund posted $5,000 for his bail. Kamala Harris would like you to donate to this cretin's bail. The weapon charge related to an October 15, 2020 incident in which Mosley had a gun while protesting inside the Hennepin County Government Center. Sounds like insurrection, where the officers involved in George Floyd's death were making a court appearance. Well, we certainly can't trust the justice system. We have to supplant it and replace it with Black Lives Matter Corporation. When officers arrested Mosley for property damage charges based on his behavior during an August riot, they found a handgun. This allowed them to obtain a warrant to search his vehicle, where they discovered this mostly peaceful protester had a massive cache of firearms and tactical gear, including 3 handguns, a shotgun, a semi-automatic rifle, a gas mask, and about 50 rounds of ammunition, plus a stash of cocaine, mushrooms, and marijuana, because they are the cream of society. In addition to these items, they also found a hatchet, a crowbar, and a bulletproof vest. Sounds like an Antifa starter kit. Mosley was released thanks to the Minnesota Freedom Fund, but was later charged with second-degree rioting after he participated in a New Year's Eve melee where rioters damaged buildings and scrawled messages that read, "Mostly peaceful political protest." No, what did it say? "Down with America, kill all cops, crime wave 2021, America's last year, and death to America." Mostly peaceful protest, not incitement to rioting or insurrection at all. Completely law-abiding citizens, mostly peaceful, don't forget, and exactly the kind of people that vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. While dealing with the riots, police officers recovered a handgun, knives, 3 cans containing a suspected wax and fuel substance, a green laser, mace, improvised spike balls, a taser, fireworks, gas masks, body armor, helmets, and 2-way radios. Ladies and gentlemen, incitement to insurrection by the then vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris. The evidence is overwhelming. It's not only overwhelming, it's sustained. And as usual, the lying harlot media on this witch hunt to get another person who is a major threat to their kingdom of darkness, Donald Trump, accusing this guy who said, make sure you march peacefully. Of course he told people to march on Washington, on Capitol Hill. That's how political protests happen everywhere. He didn't tell them to break the law doing it. And you've got to know that those kind of people are everywhere. Now, here's the difference. I absolutely condemn every single person who did not protest peacefully, and I absolutely condemn them to the justice system. They should be charged and found guilty of domestic terrorism, violence, rioting, and all of those things. Every protest should follow the laws of the land. Here's another thing. I think police should deny permit for protest, deny protesting permits when there's one already in place. You either go 10 blocks away if you want a simultaneous protest so that we keep the peace and maintain law and order, or you do it the next day. Keep those crowds separated and protest to your heart's content. If you think protest means civil disruption and disorder and anarchy, then forget about it. That's not the right you have to protest. You have a right to peaceful protest. That's the right you have, and that's all of it. Now, the difference between a conservative and a leftist, a lying harlot media Democrat leftist, is that we will absolutely condemn the same crime, whether it's on our side or their side, because we're interested in what's right, what's true, what's just, and what's liberal. Whereas they will change the rules depending on their politics. If it's on their side, they justify it, they incite it, they encourage it, they lie about it and call it mostly peaceful. But if it's on the other side, if there's even a hint of smoke, they yell arson and they yell all kinds of accusations that are extreme and unbelievable. Unbelievable. Right, let's wrap it up. One final promo for tonight. I would like to remind you that George Pell is speaking at the Church and State Summit. Let me see. Okay, here's the URL where you can get your tickets, churchandstate.com.au. So please click on that link. If you're not handy to Brisbane or Hobart, you can't travel, you can't get there, not sure about the borders, etc., at least avail yourself of the $20 video ticket. You're going to get to hear 10 speakers over about a dozen different sessions per video, per hour. That's extremely cheap, but you will help make that conference a success. And the whole point of that is to encourage Christians to stop observing, to get off the sidelines and into the culture war, not for the pursuit of power, but for the pursuit of peace, justice, liberty, and the best conditions for human flourishing for our neighbours, for 25 million people other than ourselves. It's not about power, it's about love of neighbour. And if you're doing it for any other reason, please don't join in. It's 100% about making sure that there's justice, peace and liberty in the nation of Australia and wherever you live. So that is what the Church and State Summit is all about. It's about arming Christians to influence culture, to fight against these nefarious, wicked agendas that seek to raise themselves in opposition to the knowledge of Christ. And that's something that we are here to be a preserving and illuminating influence against, to promote the kingdom of God, because it is absolutely good for everybody. We're going to take the time during the Church and State Summit to prove that Christianity is true. We're going to examine Christianity among other ideologies and worldviews and how that's worked out for the different societies that have experimented with them. Whereas compared to the above average flourishing conditions of nations built on Christian values and principles, with or without a personal faith in Jesus Christ, which I can endorse to you as well. But that's it for this evening's show. Thank you for those people who have watched and joined in. By the way, the early bird tickets are on sale still until the 12th of February. There's still 10 days left. At the 12th of February, it'll go up to the full value price of $99 for 2 days worth of content, and that is still really, really cheap. I have so many people telling me they feel embarrassed they paid so little. I'm not joking. They actually say that. After they've paid airfares, after they've paid accommodation, they still feel like they ripped the Church and State Summit off by not paying more for their conference ticket. We're trying to jam value into there and cover the costs and be good to our speakers and continue this ministry and this initiative for the next 12 months. So there are discounted tickets for students, pensioners, and in appreciation of active or past members of the military, discounts for them. We really want everybody to participate. And of course, the early bird ticket is a significant 20% saving off the full price ticket. And of course, if even those are too much for you, then there's the $20 video ticket. If you can't afford $20, write me an email, dave@goodsource.news, and I will shout you a free video ticket. But please be genuine, because I will absolutely make sure that nobody misses out for the sake of money. It's only about recovering costs. And of course, there's plenty of people who go and make generous donations on top of their ticket prices, which I really appreciate as well. That's suggested, but not necessary. Base Taz says, well, as we go, let's pray for Western Australia, and they're experiencing a lot of bushfires at the moment. Yeah, that's this evening's show. Look forward to sharing this with you, seeing you in the comments, continuing the conversations. If you write me an abusive email, I may just reply and read it out on the show. But we've had enough of Pellowe talk for this night, so I will say good night and thank you very much, and we'll see you on social media. Good night.
If not now, then when will we see an end to all this pain? Oh, it's not enough to do nothing. It's time for us to do something.